Good morning, everybody. Welcoming you to the freelance teacher update. It's probably the best way to put it. I got back from a trip from another state, and I was actually in Virginia. And I'm just going to give you, let's do a 5 to 10 minute at the most conversation, because I think and I'm going to call this the separation begins, because I think it's pretty obvious to me that the separation is really starting. And the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus era that we are in, is starting to show it. There's a lot of stuff going on. Very little of it makes any sense. And so you have a beginning of the end, so to speak, because you have. Well, let me share with you what I saw on my trip. I went to Virginia in mid-June, and I went this for a few days. I just got back yesterday. And when you fly from New York to Virginia to Richmond, there aren't any direct flights anymore. You have to go from New York City to Charlotte, and then from Charlotte to Richmond. And so what you had is the same kind of crowd for pretty much for both flights in terms of numbers of the four flights. Two were crowded, two were not. On the June and the July, or I'm sorry, the June and the August trip. In June, in the Charlotte airport, masks were not mandatory. They were just recommended, and you had about, I'd say, 60% of the people wearing masks, 40% not. In LaGuardia, in June, I believe masks were mandatory. I believe, but I'm not 100% sure. But not everybody was wearing one, and we realized that things were on the downswing. Well, showing you the power of media, corporate media, and herd mentality. In both airports, masks were mandatory, and also and what you had during the trip, you had 99% of the people wearing a mask. The reason why I bring that up is not because I'm mask phobic or anything like that. I can understand wearing a mask during the novel coronavirus era in an airplane. It's recycled air. There's not much, they can say, hey, look, we don't want to get sued. We want you to be safe. Wear this mask in the plane. In the airport, it doesn't make any sense at all. And the reason why I'm talking this way is because every number that is related to being lethal is down, right? Death rate is not even comparable to March or April. So it's way lower than it was back then. You had death rates plummeting, even though you had the news screaming about cases. And it's really kind of disappointing, because I liked the pre-corona United States. I didn't love it. There were issues that needed to be ironed out, but I was enjoying my time here in these United States. It's a shame that people's inability to think or understand math or science is so wretched. Their willingness to follow is going to wind up being the separation. But if that's how it goes, then you make the best of it, and you decide to go with whatever faction you decide. So the reason why I talk in this manner is because the pushback. It makes no sense to have masks be mandatory and be hyper and crazy about it now in August, and to be more lax in June. But that's how it is, and that's how people were. It was really something to behold. I didn't wear a mask at all in June in the Charlotte airport, but I did because they said it was illegal. And there are ways around that, and to complicate it, it's another podcast. But I was traveling to see family, so I weighed the pros and the cons. The other thing is, you now have major sports conferences like the Big Ten canceling football. Actually, they just today canceled sports. Now, I want you to think about how ridiculous that is. That this is now something that is this COVID, and it's turned into nonsense. I'm going to say nonsense because, the talking point of, I don't This is the New York Times and CNN talking. The people who are don't want to wear a mask, they're just not following the science. That's just a talking point. You can follow science and math all you want, and you can follow corporate media all you want, but what you can't do is just kind of make stuff up. So you have the Big Ten canceling sports, not just football. And that means you get weird things like this. The University of Iowa is in the Big Ten Conference. The University of Iowa in Iowa City, I'm a former Iowa Hawkeye, can't play sports. So they can have people on campus, and they are. Going to campus is part of what's coming up in, 2 weeks, a week? So you're going to have people in dormitories. You're going to have people in libraries, cafeterias, fraternity houses, cafes. But they can't go to a baseball game or a football game. Can't go to any of the fall sports. Canceled. That's a little weird, especially because Iowa high school football and high school baseball have been playing, and everything is fine. And of course everything is fine because the coronavirus isn't going to come and kill people by the millions. Just to remind you, the estimate for Sweden was something around 95,000 deaths because they're not locking down and they're experimenting with human death. Now, 96,000 has turned into under 6,000, but let's not talk about that in a country of 10 million people. We're supposed to love Sweden and their social democracy. Until they go against the coronavirus narrative. Now they're being ignored because Sweden got herd immunity and they've solved their problem. And now their economy is going very well while the rest of the European area is in the toilet. So going back to NCAA and the United States and sports, well, guess what? University of Iowa is a Big Ten school. Iowa State isn't in the Big Ten. They're in the Big 12. So they can play, and they will play. So the Iowa State Cyclones in Ames will be playing football and be playing sports. In the same state, it's a couple hours drive as University of Iowa, which can't play. Now, in no universe is that following the science or the math or anything other than determined incompetence in dealing with the mostly overreacted, hysterical coronavirus narrative. Just recently, The Atlantic had an article on the authoritarian governor of Georgia. Authoritarian. It was a black and white picture of the governor of Georgia looking very stern. Now, the people at The Atlantic have never met a war that they haven't supported, a government action they haven't supported. They love government. They think government is the answer to everyone's problems all the time. But guess what? The governor of Georgia isn't following the corona narrative. Therefore, major story, black and white stern photo of the governor of Georgia, the authoritarian governor. And here's the separation part of this. I see this instantly. I'm part of Michael Malice's Locals site. The people in that group see it instantly. A lot of regular people see this stuff automatically. And there are another group of people who are screaming at everybody else to put on a mask, shaking their head. Some Karen shook her head and said something under her breath to me and my wife before I went on a family trip. Of course, my wife is not a weak person and didn't grow up weak. All right, growing up in the bad neighborhood, my wife snapped and told her what she could do with her mask and said, why don't she come over and talk to her in her face? Of course, Karen walked away shaking her head because she's now scared. She's thinks that, well, she was thinking that we were soft targets. So you're going to have a separation between the Karens of the world, both male and female, Karen and Garen, Karen and Ken, whatever you want to call them, and the people who read that article in Atlantic and take it seriously, the people who think that, and this is how this is working, you can send children back to school, but as of yesterday, I couldn't go into the local Spanish restaurant that I love, and I couldn't sit inside and eat with my wife, who I met 23 years ago. Those two things. There's a school down the block from where I was eating dinner outside yesterday. I could not go into that restaurant because of Corona. Don't you know COVID is going to kill you? But students in September in New York, I'm in New York City, I live in the Bronx, they can go to school. Now, I think they should be able to go to school. The risk for children is effectively zero. They should be able to go to school 5 days a week, regular schedule. They do it in Sweden. They do it in Japan. Oh, you didn't hear about Japan? Of course you haven't. Japan just crossed north of 1,000 coronavirus deaths as a country. I think they have 1,038, something like that, as of yesterday. A country. Oh, well, they're all spread out. It's Japan. They've got some of the most crowded cities in the world. Go to a Google image search. Rather than just being an idiotic, mouth-breathing, repetitive cynicism butt nut, go look at Tokyo on Google Maps. You've never been to Tokyo, so don't even comment. Go look and explain to me why Japan has 1,038 or 1,062 or whatever it is coronavirus deaths. You know what they did? They said, let's be smart about this. Protect the elderly, protect yourself, be cautious. Here's what we recommend. Now go and do it. And they did. Herd immunity was one of these things that people worshiped. The CNN corporate media, Time Magazine, New York Times, New Yorker group, you get your vaccines and you have herd immunity. We respect herd immunity until coronavirus. Now everything is different. So I'll finish with this point. It's frustrating for somebody like me and the millions of people like me to think that the people who worship death, who think we as perfectly healthy people should stay inside until the risk is, zero? Near zero? You're perfectly healthy. Stay inside until there's no risk. There are people who believe this. There are government officials who rule over us who believe this. I'm in New York City. I'm in one of those areas. You have to be ignorant of history to think that people are going to take it. That people aren't going to use their ability to move, their ability to adjust, their ability to say no. And so in an area like this, there are a lot of people who are like, you got to be kidding me with the mask stuff. Now, in August, there's no justification for it. And so you're going to see, at first, kind of underground, people separating themselves. Where you're going to have, you're going to have a group of people in any area. Pick it, northern Idaho, California, New York City, parts of the Bronx. And they're going to say, we're not doing, you got to wear a mask, otherwise you're going to kill everybody. And they're just going to say, some of them are going to say it rudely, and some of them are just going to ignore those people. And they're going to go about their business to be like, look, we're not buying into your stupid narrative. And those people are going to be separated because the mask-wearing Karen, the mask-wearing Garen, they're not going to be, they can't think on their own. And CNN has told them that they have to wear a mask, and that governor, that terrible governor in Georgia, is authoritarian and terrible, and he's playing with fire. The entire Southeast Conference, that sports conference, all those states, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Missouri, Louisiana, all of them combined don't equal the death rate, the death number in New York City, or in New York State. Yet the authoritarian governor is someone in the Atlantic. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing, like, that's not a way to live. The whole reaction is so overblown on this one, it's not even funny. And I'm convinced that the power elite wanted to find, among the other reasons for doing this, they wanted to find out how much can they get away with. And they can get away with a lot. All they have to do is say you're going to get the flu, and they can tell you to shut down your business. And people will do it. So they're now drunk with power. They see what they can do. And they're going to maneuver to tell you what to do and run your life the way they think you should run it. And I'm just telling you right now, there are millions of people who aren't okay with anyone. Right? There's a governor in Florida, Ron DeSantis. I don't know the guy, but people are saying he's a horrible man because he's trying to open up and has opened up a lot of Florida. Even though Florida death rate is so low, it's not even funny. Yet New York death rate sky high, and Cuomo is seen as a hero. What? So there isn't going to be a lot of noise. But you're going to see people who don't want to live like protected, inoculated cattle. And they're going to separate themselves from those who do. And there will be various gradations of this. I'm telling you this now, in August of 2020. It's already starting. The sports world, you can go look at Clay Travis and Jason Whitlock on Outkick, the way they talk and the way they write and what they produce. And the reaction to them, that's just in sports. Online, you can see the Urban Farmer and his material, unauthorized.tv. You've got all kinds of things online where people are, even someone like Kurt Schlichter and townhall.com. That's a mainstream conservative red meat site. And they're, that's not fringe or weird or, conspiratard stuff. And you're kidding yourself if you think that the people reading that are going to have some blue-haired, sociology degreed state official screaming at them, telling them how to live. Not going to happen. So the separation is going to be from public to private, and the number of private areas where you can live free, they're going to thrive and do well. And there are going to be people screaming at them to live you can't live in this private maskless area. You need to follow the orders that the rest of us sheep are following. You're going to hear stuff like that. And the people in that private area are going to say, no, we don't. Come and do something about it. And that's the separation. And that's pretty much how it's going to go. That's how I see it. I don't think I'm wrong. I recommend you at least consider the message that I'm giving you, so that later on, you're not the person on the outside saying, please, can I come into your free private area where I can just live a normal life or just go camping or something and not have Karen screaming at me or Democrat, progressive, liberal, purple-haired weirdo shouting at me all the time. You don't want to be on the outside looking in. You want to get that stuff set now. Take care. Talk to you next time. Have a good one.